All right, we have problem 22 for our SAT Math calculator section. It's saying which quadratic equation has no real solutions. All right, another problem where you actually don't need your calculator for the calculator section. The best way to do this, because it's asking for which one has no real solutions, is to look at each of them and figure out which three do have solutions, process of elimination, and then you'll be left with the one that doesn't have a real solution. Okay, now important language here, no real solutions, so it's not talking about imaginary numbers, okay? So no real solutions, okay? So if you find an imaginary solution, maybe that's a clue that that's not the one you're looking for, okay? So we'll start with A. We have 3x, I'll write a little, move this up. A, we have 3x squared minus 3 equals 0. So now the easiest thing to do, because we have 3's over here, we can divide the whole thing by 3 and the right side by 3. Those cancel along with that one. So we have x squared minus 1 equals 0. We know we can factor that because we have our difference of two square rules, right? So this is a square number, this is a square number. They're being subtracted, they're a difference. We have x plus 1, x minus 1, those equal 0. And from there, we know we can solve from that and get x equals negative 1 or positive 1. If you haven't seen that before, what you do is x plus 1 equals 0, x minus 1 equals 0. If you wanted to see that one through, and you'd get subtracting 1 to get a 0 pair and adding 1 to get a 0 pair, adding 1 to get a 0 pair on both sides, we would get x equals negative 1 and x equals positive 1. So x equals plus or minus 1, right? So then for B, so that one works. A works. We're going to check mark by A instead of at the bottom. Okay, so A works, so it's not A. B. Let's try B. So we have 3x squared plus 3x equals 0. So we're doing the same trick as before. Okay, 3x squared plus 3x equals 0. Very similar problem. Divide the whole thing by 3, right side by 3. Those cancel, all the coefficients, and 0 divided by 3 is still 0, right? So we have x squared plus x equals 0. All right, now we have two options. We could complete the square, or since that might yield a tricky number because that might be like a fraction or something, what we could do is we could subtract x to the side and think about the problem conceptually. So let's do it that way. X squared equals negative x. All right, so since usually we want to isolate it on both sides, but we just want to find a solution for this one. And if we think about this, what value squared is going to be a negative version of itself? Okay, so can't be anything bigger than 1. So like for example 2, because anytime we multiply any number bigger than 1 by itself, that number's magnitude will increase. For example, 2 squared equals 4, right? So there's no way you can do 2 squared to get a negative 2, because 2 squared is negative 4, right? So like 2 squared would be 4, right? So then, since 2 squared equals 4, our x over here would be negative 2. Excuse me, from what I said before, our 2 squared is going to be 4, which is not equal to negative 2, right? So then it gets even worse as you get to large numbers, like a million squared is a million times a million, which is a huge number that clearly is super, super far, especially in the number line, be like way over like here. That'd be a super, super large number, like a million times a million. Comparing that to negative million, it'd be not even close to equal, right? Because that'd be negative million, be like way over here, right? So we can see that's not gonna work for any numbers that are bigger than 1, even like 1.5. 1.5 times 1.5, that's gonna be bigger than negative 1.5, right? But let's take 1. Let's try 1. 1 squared is just 1, right? That equals negative 1? No, it doesn't. But we're getting closer, right? Because the magnitudes are equal. So let's try flipping the sign. Let's try negative 1 for x. Negative 1 squared is a negative times a negative equals 1. Okay. I'm going to do this all beneath here. Negative 1 times negative 1. And then we'll do the right side and see if they're equal. Negative 1 times negative 1, which equals a positive 1. Okay. So let's check out the right side. The right side, when we substitute, is going to be negative, negative 1. Remember, this is x equals negative 1. Negative times negative 1, which is a negative 1 times a negative 1. And we can see it's the same thing, which is also going to equal 1. Two negatives times each other, or negative times a negative is going to equal positive. So 1 equals 1, which is true, which means we have found a solution for b, so it can't have no real solutions because we found a real solution, because -1 is a real number. Remember, negative numbers are real numbers, okay? It's the square root of negative numbers that are not real numbers, for example, right? All right, so b works, so it can't be b. Remember, anytime the equation works, that means it's not our answer because our equations ask for ones that don't have answers, right? Okay, let's try c. So for c, same thing as before, we have 3x squared plus 3x plus 3, kind of the same thing, equals 0. Divide all of that by 3, right side by 3, we get x squared plus x plus 1 equals 0. Now, this one's tricky because anytime we see a trinomial, we've gotten a good practice of trying to find two binomials it multiplies to. So we have x plus something times x plus something equals 0, right? But I can't think of any numbers that multiply together equal 1. And when they add together, they also equal 1. Because the only number times anything that equals 1 is going to be either a fraction and its reciprocal, like 1/2 and 2 over 1, right? Because a fraction times its reciprocal is 1, or 1 in itself. And 1 in itself don't work, right? Because 1 times 1 is 1, but then if we put 1 and 1 here, and we FOIL that, we're going to get x's, like 1 times x is x, and 1 times x is x for the inner and the outer part, which means x plus x, when we're combining like terms, will give us 2x. But 2x is greater than x, so that's not going to work. Those aren't equal. So let's come back to C. We can't think of anything for right now. We'll come back to it. We'll see if that might be the one. So we have a clue where it's hard to find an answer, so maybe that's the right one. Okay. We don't know what for sure doesn't have one, just because we haven't found one yet. But let's try D and see what happens. So we have 3x squared minus 6x plus 3 equals 0. Okay. Then divide the whole thing by 3. See how it's the same trick for all of them? That's really nice they did that way for us. Once we divide by 3 by all of them, this cancel, 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 cancel. Actually, this one doesn't cancel. This is going to be 6 divided by 3, which is 2. Negative 6 divided by 3, which is negative 2, right? Plus 1. We just divided them all by 3, right? 3 divided by 3 is 1. Negative 6 divided by 3 is negative 2. 3 divided by 3 is 1. All right. Now, we have the same trick. We're trying to factor. This one. Do we have two things that multiply to 1? That when they add together equal negative 2? Yes, we do. We have x minus 1. Or we have minus 1 and minus 1, right? Okay. Because when we FOIL, we have x squared minus x, x squared, x times x, minus x, negative x times 1, or x times negative 1, x times negative 1 again, minus x, and then negative 1 times negative 1 equals 1, plus 1. Combining like terms, we can see that we get negative x minus x is negative 2x plus 1. We see that this and this are equal, which means this also equals that. Okay, so then we can set each one equal to 0, but since we have two of them that are equal to each other, this is actually negative x minus 1 squared, like the whole thing squared. So we just have x minus 1 equals 0. Add our 0 pair, add it to the other side, x equals 1. So just your answer is x equals 1, so D does have a solution, which means it can't be D, and there it is. C was hard to find a solution for. Turns out the rest do have solutions, so by process of elimination, our answer is C.